I think we are in a very long cycle of inflows into Bitcoin as an asset class. And I wouldn't be too caught up in I'll call them just mining cycles. I just having cycles. I don't think these things are relevant anymore. How far can we get in, say, the next year or two? I definitely think 500,000 is reasonable, right? I think if you throw $1 trillion into this market, which is kind of what I think we're talking about, right? Putting $1 trillion into Bitcoin, into an asset that's currently worth 1.4 trillion, and you put a sort of a normal multiplier of 30 on this thing, which is kind of where these things tend to be. I think you're going to get a price of $1 million or 2 million, potentially even. You could get something. Multiple might come down, et cetera, but you get the general drift, right?
Yeah.
There's no lack of firepower getting us to 500,000. None. We could go to 1 million, we could go higher.
Fred Krueger begins by outlining the enormous size of the U.S. financial market, which includes an astounding $46 trillion in stocks, an additional $46 trillion in corporate and municipal bonds, and approximately $6 trillion in cash. The combined market value of conventional finance, or TradFi, is an enormous $100 trillion. But institutions have only begun to explore the potential of Bitcoin, despite its growing significance. Through ETFs and firms like MicroStrategy, they now have a mere $100 billion invested in Bitcoin, which makes up just 0.1% of their entire holdings. This provides Krueger with a huge opportunity. He predicts that in the upcoming years, institutional allocations might easily increase tenfold to 1%. Because Bitcoin has special characteristics, this money infusion, which may reach $1 trillion, could have a significant effect on the market value of the cryptocurrency. Krueger suggests Bitcoin's price could skyrocket to $1 million or even $2 million per coin. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and enable post notifications for more insights like this. Now let's hear his following words.
If you look at kind of just the U.S. market, right? U.S. stocks, it's about $46 trillion. U.S. bonds, about the same when you throw in corporate bonds and munis together. And then you have cash that's about $6 trillion, right? So you put all that together, it's about $100 trillion, right? Well, how much do these TradFi guys have of Bitcoin? Well, it's pretty easy to see. What are they going to own? They're going to own the ETFs, right? Or they're going to own MicroStrategy. Those are the two things that they can own. And, MicroStrategy is worth about $40 billion and the ETFs are worth about $60 billion. So it's about $100 billion, right? So roughly speaking, they've got a $100 billion position in an asset of a total $100 trillion. So they own about 0.1%. That's how big they are.
Yeah.
Nothing. They're 1/10 of the percent in. So what I think is that, for that 1/10% to get to 1% is not at all a stretch. I just think that's a given. That will happen, Will it happen over the next year? I don't know over the next year, but over the next 2-3 years, I think we'll get there. And I think if you throw $1 trillion into this market, which is kind of what I think we're talking about, right? Putting $1 trillion into Bitcoin, into an asset that's currently worth 1.4 trillion, and you put a sort of a normal multiplier of 30 on this thing, which is kind of where these things tend to be. I think you're going to get a price of $1 million or 2 million, potentially even. You could get something. Multiple might come down, et cetera, but you get the general drift, right?
Yeah.
There's no lack of firepower getting us to 500,000. None. We could go to 1 million, we could go higher. There's so much money on the sidelines, which is sort of the mirror of us being in such a debt position, right? We've been living on fiat for so long that we produce so much fiat that there's this mountain of fiat that is out there. And, it's for 11 months now, it's starting to find its way into Bitcoin. And it's just starting. And so this, regardless of who's elected, this mountain of money is coming for your Bitcoin. First of all, it's not 100% sure that we're in an S curve, right? We're in something at this point which is very statistically close to a power law, right? Does that turn into an S curve? That remains to be seen. That basically, when a lot of people think about an S curve, they think that we are about to accelerate into sort of the bottom of the S curve. And I think that's unlikely. I think the S curve, kind of S curve that we might be in, is something called a Weibull distribution, which actually means that it just sort of tapers out. So it is a little bit like an S curve, but it tapers out. So that's just a mathematical kind of difference between some of the typical S curves, which are called logistic S curves. And so I don't expect a massive increase like a hump that we're just suddenly going to go completely ballistic and then taper out. I think we're more likely to continue what we are, but maybe really start slowing down in something like 20 years, right? So I think we're in the very early phases. For now, I think the Bitcoin price is behaving very much like a power law. And what it does 20 years out, I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be around to know. But I can tell you that right now it really is a power law for now. A data series of 3, right? To say it crashes every 4 years. I don't necessarily think we may repeat that this time. And the reason I say that is we have institutional adoption on a level that we have never seen. We have mining rewards that are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So I think the impact of mining is just not going to be noticeable in the future, unless you're a miner, right? In which case, I do think those halvings are going to be significant. But I think that I think we're going to be more into the sort of final stretch of the maturity of Bitcoin, and I think it's going to be more like the stock market over the last 10 years. We didn't have 4-year cycles in the stock market. I don't necessarily believe that we will have another 4-year cycle. I think that may be over. Doesn't mean we're not going to have bear markets, right? We could have big bear markets, but they don't need to be timed around halvings. There's no real reason why this mining reward thing is bearish at all at this point.
Fred Krueger thinks power law dynamics will make a $500,000 price for Bitcoin possible in the next 2 years. He estimates that within a year, the fair value of Bitcoin may increase to about $120,000, with potential peaks of up to $500,000, 2 standard deviations above this figure. These peaks, however, may be temporary and frequently followed by sharp declines due to Bitcoin's notorious volatility. Krueger highlights that this volatility is a necessary component of Bitcoin's growth rather than a drawback. He advises investors to concentrate on long-term plans and steady allocations rather than attempting to time the market precisely. Before we continue, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more expert crypto content. Now, let's dive back into the interview and explore more insights from Fred Krueger.
Well, roughly speaking, if you look a year from now, at the power law sort of says that the sort of fair value is going to be around 120,000, something like that, right? Now, the power law, to simplify it dramatically, it will sort of say, if you double that, that's kind of 1 standard deviation, right? So 250,000 is 1 standard deviation above it, and 500,000 would be sort of two standard deviations, right? Yep. Now, 2 standard deviations is not really super sustainable, but it has happened in the past quite a bit, right? We were there in 2020. We were there in 2017, right? In 2017, it was even more than 2 standard deviations. So do I think it's possible? Yeah. Do I think if it goes there, it probably will retrace back pretty quickly? I also do, So I think we could get to 500,000, but then we could crash all the way back to 250,000, right?
Yeah.
So Bitcoin does not spend an enormous amount of time at these kind of peak levels. It gets there, it spikes up, it spikes down. That's kind of what it does typically. And I just don't think as a Bitcoiner that your goal is to try to hit the absolute top and sell everything either. Your goal potentially is you're going to peel away some, if you want at all to peel away some, as we get kind of on the higher side, and then maybe buy back that some if we go down to more fair value or through fair value. But I do think we could, I don't think 500,000, like if we get to 500,000 in 2 years, I would not be shocked,
Yeah, I agree.
And I also may have sold a little bit of my Bitcoin before then. Not a lot, but just a little bit, because the way I approach this is sort of like, I kind of feel like, to simplify it, I think your best allocation is some percentage of your net worth in Bitcoin, and you rebalance that something like once a year. You know what I mean? And if you're sort of 70% in Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin doubles, well, now you're not 70% in Bitcoin, right? Because the rest of your portfolio probably hasn't doubled, so you're probably 85% in Bitcoin, right? So, maybe at that point you peel off 15% and you get back down to 70% of Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be a little bit of that going on, not just, institutions, I think, who bought Bitcoin and who got to their full allocation will do that. But I think a lot more new guys are just coming in and they're just going to buy.
Fred Krueger explains the possible price swings of Bitcoin over the next few years using a simple power law model. He believes that within a year, the fair value of Bitcoin might approach $120,000. He goes on to explain that according to the power law, Bitcoin would be worth roughly $250,000 if it were 1 standard deviation over this fair value, and about $500,000 if it were 2 standard deviations higher. However, Krueger emphasizes that while hitting these high peaks is possible, it's not usually sustainable. He points out that Bitcoin has seen similar spikes in the past, like in 2017 and 2020, where it briefly exceeded 2 standard deviations before retracing. This pattern of sharp peaks and swift declines is common for Bitcoin. According to Krueger, if Bitcoin does hit $500,000, it might soon drop back to $250,000. He warns against attempting to pace the market precisely, stating that selling at the peak of the market shouldn't be the aim. He advises a calculated strategy instead, which is to progressively rebalance your holdings as the value of Bitcoin rises. For example, to maintain a balanced investing approach, you could sell a modest part of your portfolio's Bitcoin allocation if the price spike causes it to grow dramatically. This strategy allows for risk management while still enjoying the rewards of Bitcoin's sustained growth. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications for more content like this. We'd love to hear your thoughts on Krueger's predictions. Drop your comments below and let us know your strategy for managing Bitcoin's roller coaster moves. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.